All right, my friends out there, you nice people, wherever you are, and you good folk, you history lovers, you conscious people, I'm talking about, and you people around the world watching me. Because I got some people out there in South Africa and Australia and Ireland, and they retweeting my stuff. So I suspect that now people over there are watching me. And it's a beautiful thing that, people have decided, like this lady. Let me tell you, I've been on this sister for a long time. I said, come on the channel. She said, I gotta, you know what she was doing though, my friends? She was vetting me. She was vetting me. She said, maybe see if this guy gonna be around. I'm around. This thing is taking off. It's strong inspirations coming at you, straight, no chaser. And then next year, May 27th through the 29th, I'm having a festival in Quindara. I'm so enamored with this. I want 1,000 people to come out. And that's all I'm gonna take is 1,000. I don't get it over explode. The town is small and we're gonna make it sure it's comfortable for everybody. Get 1,000 people to come out. They're gonna show us some love. We're gonna be giving some money to the hotels, to the local caterers, to the local bands, DJs, artists in that town, which is really just on the edge of Kansas City, Kansas. That's happening. And then I'm doing another festival in Elaine, Arkansas. Oh my God. And if you don't know that story, it's devastating like Tulsa. It was 200 to 300 sharecroppers minding their own business and they shot them up. All right. You should watch that video. It's on the channel. And so a lot of good things is happening here. I'm excited that she's decided to come on. And so, what I really want you to do, my friends, and, it don't take much because I got a goal of 5,000. And that's hit the subscribe button. I want 5,000 subscribers before the end of the year, which would be really a good deal if that was to happen. That's a lot of folk, but y'all watching it. I know you're watching it. I'm keep coming at you till you do. I want you to hit the like button on this video because watch it. She gonna blow your mind. I can feel it. She got something to tell you. You're gonna be surprised. So like this video, hit the notifications bell because I'm putting the videos up at least 4 or 5 of them a week. I got that many. And then tell somebody. Don't keep it to yourself. Tell somebody about strong inspirations. Come on, my friends. I like you people. I really do. Yeah, all you hitting the subscribe don't do nothing but mean you like me too and what I'm doing. That's all. It don't cost no money. So go ahead. You know what I'm also gonna say? She's sitting there, she waiting. She said, hey, come on, man. I'm ready to roll. I said, I got 2 more things to tell you, my friends. Here go my movie. I ain't gonna tell you no more. I've been telling you about it. Watch it. It's streaming on Amazon. And now I'm about to put it up on Tubi and them other places. It's called Business in the Black. This all really what got all this started. Yeah, because I'm a filmmaker now. And then, I'm an author. I followed up on the film with this book, Black Business Book. It's good. Follow me on Twitter at A Strong Dream. Yeah, and I post pictures, people who buy them. I post their pictures when they buy them. People like this. It's easy to read too. Slaves who own businesses. If you knew that, that's good, but I didn't. And it's in the book. I named 13 of them. Tell you what they did, and then how much money they had, and how they bought their freedom. Oh, I'm putting it on you. So it's on my website, businessintheblack.net. Lastly, you hear me use this word strong a lot. Strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace, which is my introduction for the lady on the channel. Watch out. She's a strong lady. Here she about to come on. Come on, tell us your name. Let's get it on. Thank you.
Oh, Anthony, what a fantastic introduction. My name is, it's a long one, Dr. Kristen Hilaire Glasgow. You can just call me Kristen or Dr. K, whatever you want. I have a PhD from UCLA in history. I started off doing African history, most especially West Africa. And then I did what's called a field switch over to US history. and fell in love with, I believe, the topic we're going to talk about today. It
Okay.
is Miss Charlotte Horton. This is the book I've used through all of my research,
Okay.
plus many others. Charlotte Horton was.
Oh no! Before we get there,
We're done.
well, I know we're gonna talk to some about Charlotte. We got to talk about you, my friend.
All right.
Here you are. How you like history this much? How you like history this much?
This history to me is so compelling, and I actually want to. No, but I wanted to clarify a little bit, and I did say something to you in our private exchange, and I'm very candid about this with my students as well, my former students, is that I really do believe representation matters, especially with African American history, which to me is American history. And so I have stepped aside from teaching and also trying to pursue academia because there needs to be room for people of color. And so that is why I have kind of withdrawn a little bit. But again, your persistence, I said to you, are you sure you want me? And you said, I need you. And so I said, I'm here. So it's just an honor to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, don't raise
Let's
it.
get on you. How you like history so much? As a kid or something, when you were growing up, somebody said something historical to you and you said, woo.
You know, that's such a great question. I grew up in Hollywood in Los Angeles, so my family was in the entertainment industry.
Oh, really?
This is not at all popular anymore to say, and there's a lot of shame with it, although we didn't know this. My father started Bill Cosby's career, and that was in the mid 1960s. My father and Bill Cosby moved out to Los Angeles from New York to pitch his whole career. And I'm sure you know Bill Cosby was the first to do an integrated movie with I Spy, or television show, and in entertainment. So I realize he is a complicated person. But so how did I get into this? I hated school as a kid. History to me was just, I didn't even know what it was. It bored me. I was fascinated by Harriet Tubman as a kid. That just was a story I really wanted to learn about.
How'd you hear about her? How'd you hear about her?
She was in grade school, so this is in the mid 70s. We were taught about, the one token Black person.
And that was Harriet.
It was Harriet Tubman, but also think historically of the moment. This is, let's say, 1977.
Yeah.
This is when Roots is coming out, and
okay.
A Woman Called Moses is, all of that is being produced. So Harriet Tubman to me was utterly fascinating. But then I went on my showbiz career path. And then it wasn't until I was 30 that I enrolled at a community college course at Santa Monica College. And I fell in love with art history because I loved looking at art, but also the history.
Sure.
Transferred to UCLA and then fell in love with history. So I minored in art history and then got a major.
Let me ask you this. Had you thought of, because of the entertainment background, to study the history of Black history in the arts?
The reason why I didn't think about that, although that would have been a great topic.
Just off the cuff.
Because it's such a natural question, and why I never thought to bridge my life with my academic work. I just didn't for a long time. And I am doing a podcast now. In 1969, my father managed the first all-female rock and roll band signed to a label. And two of them were half Filipina. And I, since the age of 3, have known them and toured with them. I've just recently done backup for them. So I was going to write about them potentially in school, but it was African-American history that it just, again, started in West Africa. I came over, here, and like I said, I fell in love with Charlotte Horton and her family, who I hope is in your Black Businesses book. If not,
let me ask you this: when you teach, when you were teaching, how does a person get a grade out of your class that's an A compared to a C on a paper or on a test? Because, it's not multiple choice, so it's easy to memorize the name. What you have to do as a historian and a scholar yourself, you have to interpret is that your key?
It is interpretation, reading the text, reading what we call primary sources. So, a diary from 1854, which is my research. But I will tell you, and my students all knew this, for me, it was just showing up, passion, talking about it, talking about systemic racism in our country, bringing it up to the fore. Let's just roll up our sleeves and get to the nitty-gritty, and understanding what's happening today, because the past is prologue, and you can trace everything that's happening today all the way back before we.
Okay, let me ask you this. This the question just came to mind. I hope you don't mind I ask you. I don't mean no disrespect. As a person of yourself, when you do this every day, do you have you said to your class, I apologize to them? I've never asked that to anybody, or I wish this had not happened. Or
that is a great question. Okay,
you know what I mean?
I do. I absolutely wear that guilt on my sleeve. However, I try and do it differently, because what I want the students to understand is empowerment in what they're learning. And my research does not focus on enslaved people or formerly enslaved people. I focus on what they describe themselves in the 19th century, the 1800s, as free people of color. Yeah. And my research, when students are taking my class, I'm not talking about
I got you.
What you're talking about in your book is formerly enslaved people who then started businesses, right?
Yeah,
so
but I just wondered that, just because I mean, I could tell the consciousness that you have. And I just like, I got a guy on the channel. He wrote a book. His great grandfather was in the KKK.
Wow. Well, I am happy.
And I just wondered how people might feel from that perspective, because there is a lot of dynamic to Black history, and it is not all any black and or black and gray or something. And that's one of the things you talk about. I
talk about that a lot. And, I'm thinking when you're asking that question, I don't necessarily use the word I'm sorry. But what I do acknowledge is I'm an older white woman who has grown up with privilege, whether I knew it or not. I certainly know it now. And so I very much acknowledge my white whatever privilege. So the apology to me is inherent, because, and maybe I should say it more blatantly, but to me it's what I want the students to see is I want to rip open the veil of even little microaggressions that they're experiencing during the day, or that they might put on a person of color without even realizing it.
Okay. I got one more question on this note, then we can go to something, on the real deal. Have you ever had a student in your class walk out because he didn't want to talk about this?
Never.
You might have interpreted he did that because he was a racist.
I've never had a white student walk. I've never had a student walk out on me ever. I have had students of color take almost every single course I ever taught once they understood where I was coming from. And the one thing,
you had them do what now?
I had a wonderful community of students of color who, once they understood what I was teaching, then took every class with me after that they could, which to me was amazing.
I love it.
And I will say those about the white students, and usually they were, how do I say it? They were a minority, which was, and they very soon realized to stop talking and just listen to the other students around them and what they were experiencing, what they had been taught, what they had not been taught. I had a lot of students, both Black and white, who were angry that they were never taught this in high school.
Oh, okay, I love it then, yes. And so give me an example of something that upsets people, that upset your students that you taught, when got the most reaction.
Yeah, I think it's the idea, it's this very, horrible pun of the whitewashing of American history, and that the way African-American history is understood in American history is yet again tokenized, and I have my students understand that when we're reading, let's say, a general textbook, how much space is given to those who were enslaved? How is the language used about those who were enslaved? Are there free people of color? And again, this is their terminology back, contemporaneously. And why or why not? Who's being represented? Why or why not? Is a narrative being perpetuated? If still, it's Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, we get like Shirley Chisholm, we get Martin Luther King, and yet, yes, Malcolm X is there, but it's like seen as a binary. It's like Martin Luther King, good, Malcolm X, bad, right? I mean, I realize that's very kind of overly simplistic, but there is still a narrative out there that perpetuates this. So a long-winded answer to your question, the thing that surprises my students is there were that many free people of color. Oh, yes, there were. Like,
I didn't know it either.
Yeah, 500,000, and they didn't know that many of them were operating on the Underground Railroad. There was a whole network all over the North. They were, establishing anti-slavery fairs and being complete activists and vocal about it, getting arrested In terms of integrating an opera house in the 1850s.
But all these are most of what you're talking about, and do you delve into those that were in the South that were operating as free individuals?
No, my whole geography is the North. In fact, where I focus on is Philadelphia and Salem and Boston. And what a lot of people also don't realize is free people of color were working with, let's say, for example, Charlotte Fortin's family worked with Harriet Tubman. So she would go into the South, bring out fugitives, basically, and they would then be taken to the homes of free people of color, Philadelphia being one of the closest stops away from outside of slavery.
Yeah.
And so from there, where would you get rid of, in the sense of, if you were caught, you would be sent right back to slavery. So they would have to disperse these people, including going to Boston, where there was a huge anti-slavery focus, and Salem. And a lot of free people of color were able to bring in fugitives, Frederick Douglass, for example, because they could say, oh, this is my cousin from New York.
Really?
Right. So you could integrate them more, if you will, because you could just say this is a family, or this is a friend from New York. Whereas if it was a white family who was hiding a fugitive, it would be obvious, or they'd have to pass them off as, the help or something, but it would be much more of
now hold on, let me stop you there. Who are they having to prove this to?
Say that again? Who
are they having to prove this to? That they are, this is my cousin. Are these slave catchers or the local government? And also, and I know you'll address this, I heard that even in some cities, private citizens would be the ones turning them in. So go ahead, how's that work?
Well, let me just say, Anthony, you just raised a really good point, because, we try as historians not to say something like this today is, happening, is the same as back then. It wasn't. But there's a lot of restrictions going on in Texas right now with a woman's right to choose. And if anybody has researched it at all or done any, even on Twitter, you'll see that historians are saying, wow, this is like the 1850 Fugitive Slave Law, which was put back into place. It was part of our Constitution, but really put into legislation because fugitives, with the help of abolitionists, white and black, were escaping slavery at such a high rate that the US government and the local governments put into the 1850 Fugitive Slave Law, which meant if anybody was escaping, the person who helped them, the person who escaped, all of the group around them would be imprisoned, charged, fined, whatever. And think about it, if you're a free person of color, born the whole time, you've never been enslaved, you too could be captured by a slave catcher, as they were called, and sent back for a bounty. And that's why the laws in Texas, there's a bounty out.
Okay, I got you. Let's go back to this then. How did that look of the people that were helping in the Underground Railroad? If you got any on this, were they like meeting somewhere and plotting out strategy? There was, what was their community? How, because they just what you just said, they had a lot on the line. How were they coming together?
Well, here's, this, for me, it's a heartbreaking story, not in the sense of as a historian. There were copious notes that a lot of people took about what was happening on the Underground Railroad. We would have had a lot more answers to this, including people of color, white, and abolitionists. But with the 1850 Fugitive Slave Law, local government and national, everything started to oppress this idea. And so it was told that all of the Underground Railroad people destroy all of your notes, get rid of any records.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so imagine if we had these notes, if we could have seen exactly what was going on. But through my research and other people's research, there were a series of ways that the Underground Railroad worked. And what I found fascinating by my research is it was much more transparent and in the open than I ever realized.
Oh, really?
So Charlotte Fortin.
Because there's a lady on the channel, she wrote about a guy in Cincinnati, and everybody knew that's what he did. He was a free black man. He had a lumber yard or something like that. They knew he did this.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There is a wonderful man named William Cooper Nell, who was also born a free person of color in Boston. Yeah. His father was very famous, and he was running the anti-slavery office in Boston, and he was working with William Lloyd Garrison, who was the big abolitionist, and his paper, The Liberator. And I've probably read every single issue. I love it. It's fascinating. Look it up. But there's William Cooper saying, I'm giving a lecture next week on what we're doing with the Underground Railroad. And I thought, are we supposed to print that? Do people's, won't we give that away? And I said to my dissertation advisor, Brenda Stevenson, the brilliant Brenda Stevenson, I said to her, why haven't people seen this? Like, why didn't the people who were trying to catch?
Yeah, okay, what's the answer to that right quick? Let's get
right. And she basically said they just didn't think to read those. It wasn't as popular, what's the word I'm looking for? The circulation was not what it was. And I thought but it's right there.
It's right there in front of you. Yeah, that's kind of wow. Yeah, okay. Let me ask you this. Is there, if you could estimate, if a plantation, or let's say, I'm not doing a plan, let's say the state of South Carolina or Virginia, let's say Virginia is closer to Philly. Let's say the Virginia had 10,000 slaves. How many of them do you think might have actually escaped? Is there any way of giving some estimate that a plantation owner would lose 5% or 10% of his slaves to escaping?
So just to be clear, the South and slavery in the South is not my area of expertise at all.
Okay.
So
okay.
But I will say this.
Okay.
The way you might want to approach this answer is find, let's say, within the area you're looking at, find a couple of plantations, start getting the records of the owner, and start seeing in the local papers. Usually they would announce, oh, so-and-so, my slave, their words.
I got you.
Right, that's how you would do it, as opposed to how many, because we will never.
Maybe this one might. I got good questions for you. I can watch this one. How about this? Might get me somewhere. Do you have any idea of how many free Blacks there were in some particular town? You picked the town, and how many of them got their freedom from escaping, or or breakdown of how many people got their freedom however they got it? How were they born free or whatever?
There really wouldn't be that complete of a record, unfortunately. It just wouldn't be
that's
that
a good
kind
one,
of succinct. And also, again, because many records had to be destroyed. One of the fascinating things that I only learned with my research is that there was a reverse Underground Railroad. So those working on, you think Underground Railroad, right? You think Harriet Tubman, you think those in the South, or, going to the North, freedom. Well, there was the opposite, which would take those who had either escaped, or even those who were, had been free their whole lives. And the Underground Railroad took them back to the South and smuggled them into slavery. The movie 12 Years a Slave is a perfect example of that. And if you haven't seen it, it's a fabulous movie.
Yeah.
And so that's also why we don't know the records. We don't know how many.
No, but they took them back to do what? For them to be enslaved?
Yeah.
Oh, but they didn't want to go willingly.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. I got you. I see what you're saying there. Okay.
Right. So then, so for one, it was freedom. The other one, it was enslavement. And also there was, especially in New Orleans, but there were many places where young, attractive, or even just young, women of color, whether they were enslaved, usually though free, were smuggled into slavery to become concubines. So it was a different form of slavery. So there was a lot that was going on. It was not as black and white as we were talking about with teaching history. There was no this or that. It was a confluence of events that were happening. And as I say to my students, there's two things I say. If you're going to read anything, even if it's something you believe in, before you start, ask yourself, says who and what's their agenda? Okay, because agenda could be a good thing. Anthony says who, Anthony, what's your agenda? You want this, right? And the other one is basically always make sure that when you're looking at this, that you have to understand it's the context of the time, right? We look back now and say, why wouldn't they, a lot of students say, I would have fought back. I would have, absolutely done something.
Yeah.
You don't know, and so also geography matters.
Yes.
Right? And that's the thing that people, slavery South, Northern, anti-slavery freedom. Well, no, there were many Northern places that, whether it was legal or not, still had people enslaved. Yes. And I'm sure that there were many free people of color in the South who had slaves.
Yeah, we hear that dynamic just some. Now the other thing you talk about is in West Africa.
Mhm.
Okay, what's that? Give us some of that topic.
It's not that it's not utterly fascinating, but it has to do with an old Italian Frenchman. It was when I was still doing some art history. And basically there is this idea of primitivism in art. And it very much is a racist theory and ideology. It looks at African art, and it was dubbed primitivism, as in primitive, as in lower than European art. So
Really?
So there was this Italian, but he was a Frenchman, guy named Savornin de Brazza, who went to West Africa and was looking at all of this artwork and looking at, what was later became fetish items, which again is demeaning to people of color in Africa. And yet I saw he kept a diary in French. In his notes, he understood their art versus fetish items versus religious items. He understood the difference, but by the time they went back to France and to Europe, the idea of the civilizing mission to go into Africa to civilize the native, this is the idea, that's why colonization came about. By the time he got back to France, that had all been squished together into, oh, they're lower with their religious ideations, they have fetish items, but art and any of that was taken away. And if you look at Picasso's work and his cubism, it is derivative of African art. I mean, and yet it's as if he, the genius, came up with it on his own. I love his art.
I got you.
But he's got, give credit where credit is due. So that was West Africa and came over here.
Well, I think really a good part of what you're saying is who's the teller of the message. And you said that earlier. And you just cited another example of the teller of the message says, okay, this is a slant that I want to put on everything. And that's the other thing that, and I'm going back to enslavement in America. That's the other side of it. And now those that were living back in those days, how were they seen in their communities as being free? Were they able to have normal lives or still face backlash in the media or what?
Well, media would have meant newspapers, maybe. There was, another great question, Anthony, because it really depends on where you were, right? So if you're in the South and you're a free person of color, again, this is not my area of expertise.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the northern part.
But what's interesting with the research I do, so Charlotte Horton, who was a teenager, free, she came from what they called an elite family of color. She was generations of wealth. Her grandfather had patented a sale. They lived in Philadelphia. This is where all of this was starting. And I mean, there's even a book about this family and other elite families of color in Philadelphia, written by a man of color originally from the South who moved to the North and was wealthy. So he's captured this in this book. And what's fascinating about it is this elite family of color helped the enslaved, got them out, often hired them as help in their homes. I mean, they were absolutely radical activists in terms of freeing people, but there was a bit of a snobbery of they would never see these formerly enslaved people necessarily as equal. Okay. There was a bit of an elitism to how they viewed people who either didn't have money. Charlotte Horton at one point said, why do we have to be lumped together with other people who have their folly? Really? And that meant drinking and dancing. So there was again, it's not so simple.
There's always a caste system in there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely it is. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's always a caste system. Well, now, how did most people get their freedom? How were you born free? You came to America. Give some examples of people that were born free and how that might have happened.
It has
in the North.
In the North, it would have to be the context of when slavery was abolished in the North, right? So it just depends because it differed from state to state. But if you were born in the North in a free state, you were born free. And Charlotte Horton was born in 1837. And her mother and father were both born free. Her grandfather was born free.
Okay, let me stop you there. How was that happen? Because they had to get brought to America. They get brought to America. I'm thinking everybody that comes here is coming as a slave. That's not necessarily the case, though.
Not necessarily the case.
Okay, now we on to something. One more I want to, yeah, this is a good hit
Okay.
right here.
So Charlotte's grandfather, James Horton, who became wealthy in
Yeah,
Philadelphia.
he's in my book. I mentioned him in the book. Yeah.
So his grandfather purchased his freedom. In the earlier days,
Okay.
before we became a country, there were easier ways. Easy is not the right word. There were accessible ways to potentially purchase your freedom.
Oh,
Because at the time,
really?
indentured servants or slaves, it was not everywhere, but it was a little more fluid. Then we become a country and it starts to immediately, it's written in the Constitution that, 3/5 of a person if you're enslaved, and even the Fugitive Slave Law is kind of put in there, as in if anybody tries to get out of slavery.
Yes. Okay, so it just gets harsher over time.
Yes, and so if you have James Horton Sr., because he has a son, Junior, if you have James Horton Sr. in your book, James Horton Sr. has access. His business partners are white. He was apprenticed by a white man. There was a respect that he garnered within the community because of he not only was wealthy, but he was church going, and his family and his wife, who was also an elite woman of color. So they were very well respected. By the time you got to, so this is, let's say, 1810s, 20s, right? By the time you get to the late 30s, early 40s of 1830s, 1840s, when James Horton has passed away, his sons now are wanting to take over the family business. Racism is on the rise. You have these race riots going on in Philadelphia, and suddenly the of the fluidity of a white and black community is starting to dissipate. And that's when Charlotte's family, Robert, her father, the son of James Horton Jr., but Robert, a lot of them leave the city and move out to the country because their homes are being attacked. They're with guns. They were afraid that there's going to be kidnapping. So it's not just what was happening. It's what was happening at a certain moment in time, because it really did. It changed very rapidly from James Horton Sr., who you wrote about, to his sons.
Okay. But I think, again, what we can say, there were most African Americans that got here, or blacks that got here, they came here for the premise of slavery. Depending on the time frame, might have been some that did not come here for slavery, though. Is that the case?
I would say if they did, they came way before the system of slavery was entrenched, which is the 19th century. Once it became, the peculiar institution of slavery, as it was called, you weren't really going to relocate here from somewhere else. That was not what was going on.
Okay.
But for the other thing to think about is, yes, there were people, including Black people in Africa, who enslaved Black people, right? But also there were disbursements of where these people who were enslaved went. So, for example, Charlotte Horton goes to live in Salem with the Ramones, the Ramone family, and they're another wildly activist group. Well, their father, John Ramone, came from the West Indies. There was a huge West Indies community in Boston and Salem. And his mother had been Jewish and his father had been a plantation owner, but somewhere there had to be someone of color. But so again, very, very fluid. So it wasn't just you came here enslaved from Africa over here. And there was that, of course, but there were different routes to get over here.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I would think. As we kind of come to a close, is there and I'm sure there was some dynamics where some enslaved and slaves connected. Well, no, I'm not saying that right. Where some who were free and some who were not free, they connected it within those cities too, because the people in the South would allow their slaves to come north kind of willingly without their being with them.
Yes. Again, I don't want to speak for those.
That's another story. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a history I don't want to speak for, because there's so many.
I got one for you before we go. Had you heard of Henry Box Brown?
Of course.
Yep, I know you heard of him, and you hear about the lady who, her and her husband, they escaped to Philadelphia. She was very fair complected and made him dress up. The Crafts. Yeah,
Ellen Craft. Yes, and in fact, all of my research, the families that helped the Crafts were the Hortons and the Ramones. So this, all of this work that I do is
Okay.
connected. So I hope
Well,
you'll have
as
me
we
back, and then we can talk about what they
Yes.
did with the Underground Railroad.
One more,
And
one more as we close. Do you know of another story that's a unique story of escape that ends up in Philadelphia?
There were many.
Yeah.
There were many. They're all unique. The fact that it even happened was unique. And there were a lot more than people realize.
Is that right?
Oh,
Okay.
definitely. And again, breaks my heart that those records were gone. But
Yeah.
I just will, my dissertation work, the thing that I loved about it, and I will close with this was a free teenager of color. And she decided in 1854, after being in Salem for a few months, to start keeping a diary.
Yeah.
And a lot of people kind of wrote this diary off like cute little teenager writing a story, but my question was, why did she start a journal on May 24th, 1854, after she had been already there? And it became absolutely clear it was the Anthony Burns, so Anthony Burns trial. He was a former enslaved person who got out through these people, through Charlotte's family. And he was in Boston, which right before the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 would have meant he was free. Once he got out, it would have been like, great. But his case, Anthony Burns's case, became the pivotal moment for the slave South to really put its claws into the North and say, and Anthony Burns was sent back to the South, back to slavery. He did get out again. But so the reason why I love Charlotte Fort's journal.
That's a good one there.
Okay. Right? But the thing I love about Charlotte's journal is what I realized is, well, her family, her father, her uncle, they're the ones that had to destroy all these records on the Underground Railroad. But what would be a good way to keep a secret where nobody would know that you're documenting the Underground Railroad? It would be the diary of a teenage girl. And I read every single page of this diary, and it is unbelievable what she discusses, all the people she's meeting, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, who she's seeing lecture on anti-slavery, who she's interacting with, her code words for the Underground Railroad parties that would show up unexpectedly. So it's a wild, wild ride. And I hope.
Man, now, hold on. So now when we come, last question, we come to a close. That's a book. Is it out for that people can read it?
I will give you, if you want to, what I keep holding up is her diary, and it's not really available.
So this is a book you're writing.
I'm writing it, but my dissertation is.
I love it. I love it. Okay.
Yeah. So what I'll do when you put this out, I can type on the comments where you can find my book. Okay,
good. Yeah, so everybody, a website or something like that, how people can follow you. Oh, it's an extremely unique story, and I really appreciate it. We went around the way there a little bit, but
we did. We went around the world
because I think I was so enthralled with your passion. With the things that you said, that how you feel and what you want your students to get out of that. And everybody on the channel, this is what I do with Strong Inspirations. I find these passionate people, and you can feel it too, I'm sure, my viewers. And that's where we ended up and told that whole complete story. We're going to put the website for the book in the description and how everybody can find you. Everybody, I want you to hit the subscribe button. Come on now, hit the like button on this video, because I'm telling you, she really made me think of it from another angle, and I appreciate that, and I love it. Everybody hit the notifications bell. Tell somebody about Strong Inspirations, where we give it to you straight, no chaser. I let the experts like this lady share it with you. And then how about this? And she shared some personal stuff with us too. That was good news. And I'm sure that helped shape you, meeting Bill Cosby and that kind of thing. That was beautiful. And your dad and your family. So I say to you, sister, with all sincerity, I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love what you're doing. Sharing this. Got this book coming out on something that's going to be a bestseller. Watch, everybody. And come in and spend the time with me at Strong Inspirations. With that, I'll say bye-bye, we out.